Would you believe a puppy, barely a few months old, could survive a fall from a high bridge and change the life of a grieving man forever in ways no one saw coming, not even him? This isn't just a story about a fall or a rescue or even survival. It's about what happens when fate collides with a broken heart and a creature too young to understand the odds decides to fight them anyway. So before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Because I promise, after this, you may never look at a dog the same way again. His name was Cole Matthews, a man most people in his town barely noticed anymore, the kind who once had a big laugh, a loud presence, a warm voice that used to echo through the fire station where he worked. But now, after the accident, after that one rainy night on Interstate 9, Cole didn't talk much, not even to himself, and certainly not to others. Instead, he spent his days driving delivery trucks for a local warehouse, quietly placing boxes on porches without ever knocking, always hoping the dog behind the screen. Door didn't bark, because the sound of barking now reminded him of the silence he came home to. And nothing cut deeper than that, not even the dreams. He lived on the edge of town, where the trees gave way to rusted signs and forgotten dirt trails, a place where people dumped their mattresses and teenagers lit fireworks for fun. And it was here, on one of those nights, when the stars were blurry, and the air smelled like dust and tiredness, that Cole found himself walking alone along the Riverview Bridge, a tall, metal thing that once offered scenic views, but now mostly hosted spray-painted initials and forgotten locks of love. And as he leaned over the railing, staring at the black ribbon of river below, a sound interrupted the steady hum of crickets. A soft yelp, quick and sharp, followed by silence so thick it pulled him upright. He looked around, expecting maybe a stray, maybe a cat in the bushes, but saw nothing. Until the yelp came again, and this time it was clearer, higher pitched, full of panic, and then, from the corner of his eye, just where the bridge railing had broken off near the maintenance section, he saw a tiny flash of movement, a paw scrabbling against wet concrete, and before he could think, before his brain could catch up, Cole was running, heart racing, boots hitting metal with force. And they're barely holding on. Was a German Shepherd puppy, no older than 4 months, clinging to the outer edge of the bridge, his tiny claws slipping, eyes wild with terror, body trembling as the wind picked up, and in that split second, something broke open in Cole, something he hadn't felt in months, maybe years, a sense of urgency, of purpose, of instinct so powerful it drowned out the fear that usually gripped him. He dropped to his stomach, inching forward, one arm outstretched, fingers reaching, whispering softly, Hey, buddy, I got you. Just hold on." But the puppy didn't know what that meant. Didn't know trust, only fear, and in one heartbreaking instant, his front paw slipped and he was gone. Cole lunged forward, but it was too late. The puppy fell, tumbling headfirst into the darkness below. And the splash that followed was too far down to even sound real, just a distant plunk that echoed off the canyon walls like a cruel joke. Cole froze, chest heaving, eyes wide, staring at the spot where the puppy had been, heart hammering with guilt and helplessness, and for a long while he just sat there. Fists clenched, unable to move because it felt like watching someone fall. All over again, like that night on Interstate 9 when the guardrail didn't hold, when the truck came too fast, when the leash slipped through his fingers and the barking stopped forever. Minutes passed, maybe more, maybe less, and just when he turned to walk away, ready to let go of another thing he couldn't save, a sound rose up from the canyon floor, faint but persistent, a wet, broken howl, small, raspy, but very much alive. Cole's breath caught, eyes wide, as he leaned back over the railing and scanned the black water below, and there, bobbing in the current, barely visible in the moonlight, was a tiny head, ears pressed back, mouth open, paddling with everything. It had fighting the current like it had something to prove, like it wasn't ready to go. Without thinking, Cole bolted across the bridge, down the overgrown slope that led to the riverbank, crashing through bushes, slipping in mud, cutting his hands on thorns, heart pounding like he was running toward redemption, and by the time he reached the edge of the river, the current had pushed the puppy downstream. toward a bend where the water grew shallow and the rocks jutted out like jagged teeth. Cole didn't stop, didn't hesitate, just ran straight into the water. Boots dragging, jacket soaked, arms out, and in one desperate dive, he caught the pup by the scruff, pulling it to his chest, cradling it like it was made of glass, whispering, "I got you. I got you," over and over again as the dog whimpered and shook and clung to him, like it knew he was the only thing keeping it tethered to the world. They collapsed on the muddy shore, man and dog, soaked and shivering. Hearts thudding in unison, and for the first time in a long time, Cole felt something crack open in his chest. Not pain, not sorrow, but something soft, something warm, like maybe this wasn't just a rescue, maybe it was the beginning of something neither of them could understand yet. And as he looked down at the trembling puppy in his arms, water dripping from its tiny snout, eyes blinking slowly as if asking permission to trust, Cole whispered, "You're not going anywhere, not anymore." And the pup let out one soft breath, curled into his chest, and fell asleep. That night, under a sky full of tired stars, beside a river that had taken so much from him, Cole found something he didn't know he was looking for. And the puppy, small and soaked and brave, had fallen not just from a bridge, but straight into the heart of a man who had forgotten how to feel, and from that moment on, neither of them would be alone again. Cole didn't sleep that night, not really, not in the way people sleep when everything is normal and safe. Instead, he sat on the edge of his old couch with a half-torn blanket wrapped around the tiny German Shepherd puppy curled up against his chest, the television still flickering with a muted fishing show no one was watching. The lights dimmed low, the hum of the refrigerator, the only other sound in the house besides the soft, steady breathing of the soaked pup in his arms. And though Cole's clothes were still damp and his legs sore from the chase through the riverbank, he couldn't move, didn't want to, because this fragile little being had somehow cracked something open inside him, something that hadn't been touched since the accident, since his wife and his dog. His world really had been torn from him in one violent, thunderous instant. And now, as he looked down at the puppy, its fur stiff from dried mud, a cut on its paw, and ribs faintly visible from days without food, he realized he was feeling something he hadn't felt in years: responsibility, connection, maybe even hope, buried deep beneath the grief. The next morning, the first light of dawn crept through the living room blinds, casting thin golden beams across the floor where the puppy now lay wrapped in a soft towel, a small dish of water beside him, untouched, and Cole, who hadn't changed clothes or even noticed the scratches on his arms, stood in the doorway holding a can of chicken broth, unsure if the puppy could eat. Unsure of anything, really, but determined to try. So he knelt, scooped out some warm bits into a small bowl, and sat silently, watching until the pup sniffed it, then licked. Then devoured every bite like it had just learned what survival meant, and when it looked up at Cole with those wide, honey-brown eyes, he felt something shift again, not like a light switch, but like the slow turning of a rusted lock that hadn't moved in years. Over the next few days, Cole did something he hadn't done in months. He stayed home, not out of depression this time, but because the puppy, who he'd started calling Scout, needed him, and that simple fact seemed to rewire his entire routine. His alarm still went off at 5:30 a.m. out of habit from his firefighter days. But now, instead of hitting snooze and burying his face in the pillow, he got up, made a weak pot of coffee, and let Scout out into the small backyard, where the pup would clumsily hop through the grass, sniff every single rock, and chase his own tail until he got dizzy and flopped down, tail thumping the earth like a drumbeat of life. And for the first time since the funeral, Cole found himself smiling at something other than memory. Scout was growing fast, like he was determined to make up for the days he'd spent hungry and cold. His fur thickened, his ears perked up higher each morning, and his bark, once a soft squeak, now had depth to it, strength, and even a little sass, especially when Cole took too long filling the food bowl or forgot to toss the ball just right. They fell into a rhythm, man and dog, quiet but full of meaning. Morning walks along the old trail behind Cole's house. Afternoons spent in the garage where Cole had started tinkering with old furniture again, something he hadn't done since. Before, and Scout would sit beside him, head tilted, as if inspecting every screw and plank, tail sweeping the sawdust in slow, thoughtful arcs. One evening, after a long walk by the river, they stopped on the old bridge, the one where it all began, and Cole just stood there, hand resting gently on Scout's back. The water below glinting with the soft orange of sunset, and for a moment, he let himself think about what might have happened if he hadn't stopped that night. If he'd walked home like he always did, earbuds in, head down, heart closed, and the thought made his stomach twist. Because he knew, deep down, Scout had not just survived the fall, he had been sent, not by some divine force or magic, but by the quiet laws of chance and pain and timing that sometimes, just sometimes, lined up in a way that gave you a second chance. But even as their bond grew stronger, even as Scout learned to sit and stay and play dead like a drama king, Cole still hadn't told anyone about him, hadn't posted pictures or brought him to the vet. Not because he was hiding Scout, but because a part of him feared that once he let someone else in, once Scout became real in the eyes of the world, something might go wrong. It's like the universe would notice he was healing and try to take it away again, but that changed on a cold Saturday. Morning in October. It started like any other morning, Scout chewing on his sock, Cole pretending to be annoyed but secretly loving the chaos. Until Scout suddenly froze at the front window, ears up, body stiff, tail straight out, and let out a low growl, the kind that made your skin prickle. And before Cole could say anything, Scout barked, loud, sharp, once then bolted for the door. Cole opened it without thinking, heart pounding, and watched as Scout tore down the front yard, across the gravel drive and into the street, where an elderly woman had fallen while trying to cross with a bag of groceries, her cane lying yards away, eggs broken on the pavement, hands scraped, her head lifting weakly as she tried to push herself up. Before Cole could even move, Scout was there, circling her gently, tail wagging low, licking her hand, barking once to get Cole's attention. And by the time Cole reached them, the woman had her hand wrapped around Scout's collar, using it to pull herself upright, eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from the surreal comfort of being helped by something so unexpected. So loyal, and Cole, breathless, heart racing, suddenly felt like the world had stopped spinning for just long. Enough for him to say out loud for the first time, "This is Scout. He's mine." That moment made everything different, because the woman, whose name turned out to be Gloria, lived just 3 houses down and told everyone at church, and soon people started stopping by to see the miracle dog, bringing treats and pats and stories of their own dogs, and Cole found himself having conversations again, laughing again, even joining a local dog walking group that met at the park every Sunday, and through all of it, Scout remained. The same calm, watchful, always near, always listening. Like he understood just how fragile this healing was, and how hard Cole was working to hold on to it. But one afternoon, something happened that shook everything. They were at the river, the same stretch where Cole had pulled Scout from the water weeks ago. When Scout suddenly stopped mid-run, ears up, body low, staring at something across the riverbank, before Cole could even react, Scout took off through the brush into the trees, fast, focused, like he was chasing a scent that couldn't wait. And Cole, shouting his name, tore after him, heart thudding, branches whipping his face. The sound of Scout's barks echoing ahead, sharp, urgent, like nothing Cole had heard from him before. And when he finally broke through the last line of trees, what he saw made his knees buckle. A boy, no older than 10, was sitting on a fallen log, sobbing, arms scraped, one shoe missing. A backpack torn beside him, and Scout was beside him. Not barking anymore, just sitting, pressed up against the boy's side, letting him cry into his fur, and as Cole stepped closer, the boy looked up, terrified, and whispered, "I got lost. I didn't know where to go." The search party arrived hours later, led by frantic parents and local deputies, and when they saw the boy safe, Scout beside him like a sentinel, they didn't ask questions, just cried and hugged and whispered thank you over and over to both Cole and the dog that had somehow known again what no one else could. That night back home, as Scout lay beside the couch chewing his favorite sock,
Ah!
Cole opened his laptop and typed out Scout's story for the first time. Not for fame, not for attention, but because he needed the world to know what this dog had done, what he meant. How a fall from a bridge became the beginning of a life neither of them saw coming, and how sometimes the things that break you, the things that leave scars, are the same things that bring you home again. One bark, one step. One second chance at a time. The news about Scout began to spread quietly at first, not as a viral sensation or headline-making hero, but through hushed conversations in grocery store aisles, shared glances between neighbors, and phone calls between families that all began with, "Did you hear about the dog that saved the lost boy?" And even though Cole didn't ask for the attention, didn't post a thing online, the story had a way of slipping through fences and crossing streets like wind, carried by the wonder in people's voices and the quiet awe of a town that hadn't had anything to talk about in years that wasn't tied to politics, weather, or bad news. People started showing up at Cole's doorknob in droves, not with cameras or microphones, but with cautious smiles and homemade dog treats. Strangers who brought folding chairs just to sit in his front yard for a moment, hoping Scout might wander out and lay beside their feet as if his presence alone might bring them some kind of comfort they couldn't quite explain. And more often than not he did, walking out with the same calm purpose he always had, tail wagging low eyes. Soft. Like he somehow knew exactly who needed him most. There was something about Scout that defied logic, not in a mystical way, but in the way that made grown men cry quietly behind sunglasses, and elderly women leave with lighter steps than when they arrived. And as much as Cole tried to pretend, it was all just coincidence, just good training or lucky timing. Deep down, he knew better. Scout wasn't just a good dog. It was something else, something rare. And every time Cole looked into those intelligent eyes, he felt it again, that pull in his chest that reminded him this dog had been meant for him, sent not to save the world, but to save one man who'd forgotten how to live in it. Their daily life had changed in subtle ways. Mail carriers now stopped to talk instead of just leaving envelopes. Kids on bikes slowed down to wave. And more than once, someone left a thank you note tucked beneath a jar of peanut butter dog biscuits on Cole's porch. But through it all, Scout stayed the same, never acting out. Never barking for attention. Always there, beside Cole's workbench in the garage, under the table at dinner, or curled at the foot of the bed breathing. Slow and deep, a grounding presence that made every hour of every day feel less like surviving and more like belonging. But life, as Cole had learned too many times before, has a way of testing even the strongest things when you least expect it. And the moment came not with a warning, but with a soft, familiar voice on the other end of a phone call. Gloria, the elderly woman Scout had helped, was calling from the town's assisted living center, her words trembling with something that didn't sound like fear, but closer to heartbreak. And as Cole listened, Scout sat at his feet, ears perked, as if already sensing the weight behind every syllable. Gloria explained that a boy had gone missing again, this time not from the neighborhood or schoolyard, but from the shelter downtown, a quiet place for runaway teens, and no one had seen where he'd gone. No camera footage, no notes, just his empty room and an open window. And while police were involved and volunteers were searching, Gloria's voice dropped when she said, "I don't know why I called you, Cole, but something tells me Scout might help." Cole didn't question it, didn't hesitate. He just hung up, grabbed Scout's leash, which hadn't been used in weeks because Scout never needed one, and drove across town with a pit in his stomach, and Scout watching the road in that silent, observant way that had become his signature. And when they arrived at the shelter, Scout didn't wait to be led. He walked in, sniffed the air, and moved slowly from room to room, ignoring the people around him, nose low to the floor, body taut, like a string pulled too tight. Cole followed, heart racing, unsure if he was chasing shadows or trusting something deeper. But when Scout stopped in front of the boy's room, sat down, and looked back with eyes that burned with quiet urgency, Cole knew something was happening. Something real. They were given the boy's backpack, still full of his few belongings. And when Scout buried his nose in the fabric and gave a low, short whine, Cole knew the search was on. They followed him across the city, not in a straight line, but in erratic zigzags that seemed aimless at first. Through alleys, abandoned lots, empty playgrounds where laughter had long since faded. Every time Cole began to question it, too, doubts, Scout would stop, sniff, turn, and move again, with a pace that said keep up. Like he wasn't following a trail, but chasing a memory. After nearly 2 hours, just as dusk began to drape the town in pale lavender light, Scout led them to an old train yard on the edge of town. The kind of place kids were warned about, full of rusted cars and creaking wood, and without pause, Scout slipped through a narrow gap in the fence and disappeared into the maze of metal and silence. Cole called after him, voice sharp, hard in his throat. But there was no reply, just the sound of wind and the soft creak of old rail ties. When for a split second, Cole was back on that bridge, watching Scout fall, except this time he wasn't. Falling, he was chasing something into the unknown, and all Cole could do was follow. They found the boy beneath one of the abandoned cars, curled up in a ball, face streaked with dirt and tears, a cut on his forehead and his hands shaking from cold or fear or both. And Scout was lying beside him, body pressed close, tail flicking. Gently against the gravel, as if to say, "It's okay now, you're not alone." The boy didn't speak at first, just clung to the dog like a lifeline. Eyes wide, mouth trembling, and when Cole crouched down, gently placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, he whispered, "He found you, didn't he?" And the boy, barely able to nod, managed to breathe out, "I didn't think anyone would." The rescue was quiet, without cameras or crowds, just a deputy who came and took the boy back safely, and Cole, walking back to his truck with Scout at his side, felt something settle in his chest. Not pride exactly, but something gentler, something like gratitude. That night, back at home, Scout slept with his head resting on Cole's foot, and the world outside went quiet again. Cole opened a notebook. Not his laptop this time. He began to write, not a story, not a report, but a letter to no one and everyone. About the dog who had fallen from a bridge and risen through every impossible moment since. And at the end of the letter he wrote something that stuck with him, something he didn't fully understand until that moment. "I thought I saved him, but maybe he's been saving all of us." And as he sat there in the quiet, Scout stirred in his sleep, let out a soft huff, and leaned in closer. Like he heard the words and agreed, like he knew his job wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. The first time Scout didn't come running when Cole called his name, it was a small moment, almost invisible to anyone else. Just a few seconds longer than usual, a pause that could have been chalked up to a dream or a distraction, but for Cole, who knew every nuance of Scout's body language, every twitch of his ear and every angle of his glance, it was enough to plant the smallest seed of worry in his chest. And though Scout eventually came bounding around the side of the house, tail wagging, tongue out, as if nothing had happened, that seed didn't go away. It stayed there, silent, like a cloud on the edge of an otherwise clear sky. And over the next few days, little things began to add up. Scout taking more naps than usual, not chasing the ball as far during their walks, lifting one paw slightly like something was bothering him. Subtle changes, easy to miss if you weren't looking, but Cole was always looking now, always watching, because this dog had brought him back to life, and the idea of something being wrong was too much to sit quietly with. He brought Scout to the vet that Tuesday morning, heart in his throat, brushing Scout's fur back gently in the waiting room, as if trying to read something through touch alone. And when the vet emerged after what felt like an eternity, clipboard in hand, face calm but to calm, Cole knew before the words even came. And when they did, when he heard enlarged heart, congenital, not uncommon in shepherds, and he's not in pain, not yet. It was like being underwater, everything distant, muffled, slow.
Ow.
The room suddenly too bright, too clean, too quiet. The only thing grounding him was the soft nudge of Scout's head against his knee, that steady look in his eyes that said, "Don't worry, we're okay. We're still here." They drove home in silence, the window half down so Scout could let the wind run through his fur, his head resting on the passenger seat as Cole gripped the wheel tighter than necessary, trying not to think about clocks or endings or the terrifying possibility of having to say goodbye again to something that mattered this much, this deeply, and that night. As Scout lay curled at the foot of the bed, breathing slow, Cole sat awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, remembering every moment. Since the bridge, every life Scout had touched, every moment of laughter and light that had returned because of him, and with a deep, aching breath, he made a promise not to grieve early, not to fall apart, but to make every single day they had left count in. A way Scout would understand in the way that dogs do, not through words, but through moments, shared sunrises, long walks, muddy adventures, quiet nights by the fire, belly rubs that never ended too soon. And so they lived, not as a man and a sick dog, but as two souls who understood that time, however short or long, was a gift, not a curse. And Cole started taking Scout everywhere again, even places dogs weren't usually allowed, because he asked and because people always said yes when they saw Scout's eyes. When they heard his story, and Scout seemed to come alive again too, as if knowing Cole needed him to stay strong. To stay himself, and he did, every day greeting mail carriers. Resting beside the boy who still came by once a week just to sit with him, escorting Gloria on her slow walks to the park, a quiet shadow beside her cane, and never once showing pain, never once slowing down, unless he was tired from living, not from breaking. And then, one afternoon, something happened that neither of them saw coming. Something that would test every thread of their bond. Every second of trust they had built since that fall. It started with smoke, faint at first, just a haze drifting over the rooftops, as Cole and Scout sat in the backyard. A lazy Sunday afternoon stretched around them, the air warm, the sky golden, and Cole had just leaned back in his chair when Scout lifted his head, nose twitching, body suddenly still. And then he barked. Once, sharp and loud, not playful, not casual, but alert, commanding. And by the time Cole turned his head to look, a column of black smoke was curling into the sky. 2 blocks over, rising fast, ugly and thick, and Cole was already on his feet, keys in hand. Scout right beside him, no leash, no hesitation. They reached the street just as the sirens began to howl in the distance, but Cole, who had once run into burning buildings for a living, didn't wait for help, not when he saw the house flames licking the side, smoke pouring from the second floor. Window, and a woman in the yard screaming, "My daughter, she's still inside?" And before anyone could stop them, Cole was running toward the door, Scout beside him. Pushing through heat and smoke and memory, his firefighter instincts kicking in like muscle memory. Every step a blur of noise and heat and fear, and inside, it was chaos walls groaning, beams cracking, the air thick and choking. But Scout didn't hesitate, nose to the ground, body low, tail stiff, weaving through the smoke with terrifying precision. And Cole followed, heart pounding, calling the girl's name the mother had screamed. "Sophie, Sophie," and then Scout stopped, barked once. Pawed at a closed closet door, and Cole pulled it open to find her, small and terrified, coughing, eyes wide. And without thinking, he scooped her into his arms and turned, shouting for Scout, who was already leading the way out, barking as if to cut through the smoke, and just as they reached the front hallway, a beam fell behind them, blocking the path, fire roaring louder now. And Cole turned, coughing, shielding the girl, and Scout didn't run, didn't freeze. He charged forward through the flames, circled back behind them, and barked again, louder. Moving to a back door Cole hadn't seen, pawing it, pushing it, and together they burst through into daylight. Into the chaos of neighbors and sirens and sobbing relief, and Cole collapsed on the grass. Girl in his arms, Scout beside him, body shaking, fur singed, but alive, alive, alive. The paramedics took over. The girl was okay, just shaken, and Cole, throat raw, tears streaming, leaned down to Scout and whispered, "You did it again. You saved someone again." And Scout, always humble, just licked his hand and rested his head on Cole's lap, as if to say, "We're not done yet." That night, the entire neighborhood lit candles for Scout, not as a memorial, but as a celebration, and Gloria stood at the front, voice shaking as she told the crowd, "This dog has done more for this town than any of us ever could. And Cole, standing beside her, scouted his feet, looked around and realized that somehow the dog who had fallen from a bridge had lifted everyone else higher, had reminded them all that loyalty, love, and courage don't come from perfection. They come from persistence, from showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And as the candles flickered in the wind and Scout looked up at him with those steady, unwavering eyes, Cole knew no matter what happened next. Scout had already done the impossible not just once, but over and over again, with nothing but heart, instinct, and the quiet kind of strength that lives in the spaces between the moments we notice. And while no one could say how long Scout had, or how many more lives he might touch, what they all knew, deep in their bones, was that he had already given more than most do in a lifetime, and that whatever time was left, it would be lived fully, fiercely and beautifully, side by side, just like it always had been. Sometimes the quietest moments are the ones that echo the loudest in your soul, and for Cole, that quiet came not during the dramatic rescues or the tearful thank yous, but in the slow, golden mornings where Scout would stretch beside him on the porch, yawning wide, eyes half closed as if savoring the sun, the breeze, and the simple joy of still being here. And as the seasons changed, as autumn fell into winter, and the town around them prepared for the holidays with string lights and cinnamon-scented candles in every window, Cole found himself reflecting more, not with sadness, but with a kind of reverence, a softness in his chest that reminded him he was no longer the man who stood alone on that bridge with nothing but silence in his heart. He was someone else now, someone who had loved again, who had healed, who had been rescued in ways that couldn't be measured in headlines or handshakes, and that change, that slow, steady rebuilding, had everything to do with the dog who still followed him from room to room, whose tail still swept the kitchen floor when Cole opened the fridge, who still slept curled at his feet like a silent guardian. Scout had become more than a dog to the people in town. He was a symbol, a quiet legend, the soul of every story told over coffee. The reason children learned to love animals with reverence, the reason old men teared up when they saw him walk by. And yet, through all the attention, through every rescue and miraculous moment, Scout remained. Just Scout, humble, alert, affectionate, and always ready to nuzzle a hand or lean into someone's side when the room got too quiet. And in that way, he taught everyone, without words, what it meant to truly live for someone else. That winter, the shelter that had once housed the lost Boy Scout helped find decided to build a new wing, a quiet reading space and therapy center for children in crisis. And they asked Cole if they could name it after Scout, the Scout Room. A place filled with dog-themed books and beanbags and a soft wooden sign above the door that simply read, "You're not alone anymore." And when the dedication day came, Scout was there, tail wagging as children rushed up to hug him. Cameras snapping, and Cole, watching from the back, felt his throat tighten not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude, because somehow that little pup who fell from a bridge had built a bridge of his own, one that connected hearts, stories, generations, and healing. But time as always moved forward, and though Scout remained strong in spirit, his body began to whisper that it was getting tired. He slept a little longer in the mornings, took more breaks on their walks, and there were days when his legs trembled slightly when Cole had to lift him gently into the truck. And though every vet check said the same thing, he's doing well, considering Cole knew, with a weight in his chest he tried not to name, that their time together was becoming precious in a new way, not in panic, not in fear, but in the way you hold your breath during the last notes of your favorite song, knowing the silence is coming, but still grateful for the melody. They began to take shorter walks, just around the lake behind the house, Scout sniffing every patch of grass like he was reading old love letters. Cole, talking to him out loud now, no longer caring if anyone thought he was strange, because Scout had always listened better than any person ever had, and there was comfort in knowing those words weren't wasted. On one particular morning, when the sky was still painted in soft orange and the frost hadn't yet melted from the fence posts, Scout stopped mid-walk, turned to face the water, and sat, tail tucked around his paws, eyes fixed on the distant horizon, and Cole, sensing something he couldn't name, sat beside him, shoulder to fur, and whispered, "You remember this place, don't you?" Because it was the very spot where he had first pulled Scout from the river, where this story had truly begun, and for a long time they just sat there, man and dog, in perfect stillness. Until Scout leaned his head against Cole's leg and let out a soft, tired sigh, one that spoke of peace, of closure, of a job well done. A few weeks later, during a quiet snowfall, Scout lay curled beside the fireplace, his breathing shallow but steady, his eyes opening just enough to follow Cole's every move. And when Cole knelt beside him, placed his hand gently on his chest, and whispered, "You can rest now, buddy. I'll be okay," Scout let out one final breath, slow, warm, and full of love, and then he was still. There was no sound in that room, no cry, no shout, just the crackling of the fire and the overwhelming presence of a silence so complete it wrapped around Cole like a second skin. But instead of breaking, instead of falling back into the dark, Cole sat there for hours, his hand resting on the soft fur that had once carried 1,000 moments of joy. And slowly, gently, a smile touched the corners of his mouth, because he realized in that moment that Scout hadn't really left, not in the way people fear when they lose something. Scout had simply become a part of everything now, the way the wind brushed the porch swing, the way the town's children giggled when reading in the Scout room, the way strangers still left treats at his front gate without knocking, the way his own heartbeat carried a rhythm it never had before. Months passed, and eventually Cole rescued another dog, not because he wanted to replace Scout Nothing Could, but because he knew Scout would have wanted that, would have barked his approval, tail thumping with joy at the thought of another. Soul being given a second chance, and that new pup, a wide-eyed little mutt with mismatched ears and a crooked tail, quickly found his place beside Cole, never in Scout's shadow, but in his light, growing up with stories whispered into his fur. And one day, when he sat perfectly still by the lake, just like Scout once had, Cole smiled and whispered, No, your brother once saved this whole town." And as the pup tilted his head, curious, Cole looked up at the sky and added softly, "And me. He saved me too." And so, the legend of Scout lived on, not in books or statues, but in the hearts of everyone he touched, in the kindness he inspired, in the quiet courage he taught us all, and maybe, just maybe, in every dog that ever looks up at their human with eyes full of understanding, ready to change a life without needing a single word. So if you're watching this, wherever you are, and there's a dog curled at your feet, or one you miss more than you can say, take a second right now to hold them close, to whisper thank you, and if you feel like sharing, tell us what's your dog's name, and what time is it where you're watching from, because we'd love to know who's listening and who you're holding close tonight.